Ambassador stepped off the transport ship and took her first breath of Earth air. It smelled strange, wet and heavy and full of things she could not name. Her 4 eyes moved in different directions, trying to take in everything at once. The sky was blue, which she had read about but never truly believed. The sun was yellow and warm on her gray skin. Everywhere she looked, there was green. Plants grew without control, climbing walls and covering the ground and reaching toward the sky like they were trying to escape. A young human male walked toward her with his hand raised in greeting. He was tall for his species, with black hair cut short and a smile that seemed too big for the situation. He wore a military uniform with many small decorations on the chest. "Ambassador, I'm Lieutenant Park. I'll be your liaison officer during your stay on Earth. Welcome to Seoul." Made the formal gesture of acknowledgement that her people used. Tried to copy it and failed badly, but he laughed at his own mistake. Found this confusing. Among the collective, failing at formal gestures was a source of shame. But this human seemed to find joy in his own errors. "I hope your journey was comfortable," said as he led her toward a ground vehicle. "The Galactic Council said this is your first time visiting a Class 4 world. Earth is. Well, it takes some getting used to." Class 4 worlds were dangerous. They had extreme weather, active geology, and aggressive wildlife. Most species avoided them entirely. Humans had evolved on one. The vehicle moved through the city and watched through the window with growing unease. There were humans everywhere. Millions of them, packed into towers of glass and steel. They moved fast, talked fast, lived fast. Some rode small 2-wheeled machines through traffic that would have killed any sensible creature. Others ran along the streets for no apparent reason, wearing bright clothing and listening to devices in their ears. "Why are they running?" asked. "Exercise," replied. "It's good for health." "They are not fleeing from danger." Laughed again. No, they're just jogging for fun." There was that word, fun. Had studied human language before coming to Earth, and this word appeared constantly. Humans seemed to do many things for fun, dangerous things, pointless things, things that served no survival purpose whatsoever. They arrived at a military facility where would be staying during her observation mission. Her quarters were comfortable enough, designed to accommodate non-human visitors. The bed was too soft, but she could adjust. The temperature controls worked well. There was a screen on the wall that could show entertainment and news from across the planet. Lieutenant introduced her to the other members of the team she would be observing. There was Captain Han, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice who led the unit. She shook his hand firmly and welcomed her with formal politeness. There was Lieutenant, a medic with gentle hands and a quiet smile. There was Sergeant, a large man with a loud laugh who immediately asked if wanted to try something called Korean barbecue. And there were others, each with their own role in the unit. They all seemed friendly. Too friendly, perhaps. Had been warned that humans used social bonding as a survival strategy. They formed groups quickly and protected those groups fiercely. She would need to be careful not to become too attached. That evening sat in her quarters and watched the news on the wall screen. She was trying to understand human culture through their media. Most of it was confusing. Humans seemed obsessed with competition, conflict, and something called celebrity gossip. But one story made her stop and stare. The screen showed humans jumping from an aircraft. There was no emergency. The aircraft was flying perfectly, but the humans were leaping from it anyway, falling through the sky like stones, screaming as they dropped toward the ground far below. Then fabric burst from packs on their backs, slowing their fall, and they drifted down to land safely in a field. The news presenter called this skydiving, a popular recreational activity. Felt her stomach turn. She had seen many strange things across the galaxy. She had visited worlds where they spent centuries in silent meditation. She had observed the building their cities under crushing ocean pressure, but she had never seen anything like this. Humans were throwing themselves from perfectly good aircraft for recreation. She sent a message to immediately asking for an explanation. He appeared at her door 20 minutes later, still smiling. "You saw the skydiving report. Pretty cool, right?" "Cool," repeated. "Lieutenant, those humans were falling to their death." "No, they had parachutes, the fabric things that slow them down. It's very safe, actually. Well, mostly safe. Safer than driving a car, statistically." His four eyes all focused on him at once. "You are telling me that humans do this by choice, not because they are forced, not because they are being punished." "By choice, absolutely. It's fun. The rush of adrenaline, the feeling of freedom, the view from up there. There's nothing like it." Eyes grew distant and realized with horror that he was remembering his own experiences with this madness. "I've done about 50 jumps myself. Once you try it, you understand." Sat down heavily on her too soft bed. "Lieutenant, I have traveled across the galaxy. I have met 700 different species. I have seen things that would break most minds, but I have never met any creature that willingly falls from the sky for entertainment." Just smiled that impossible human smile. "Ambassador, with respect, that's exactly why the Council sent you here. You need to understand us. And the only way to understand humans is to see how we live. This is just the beginning." He said goodnight and left her alone with her thoughts. Looked back at the screen, where the footage of falling humans was playing again. She watched them scream with joy as they plummeted toward the earth. She watched them laugh and embrace when they landed. She watched them talk about doing it again. These creatures had crossed the stars. They had survived their deadly world. They had built cities and machines and art and music, and they celebrated by pretending to die. Pulled out her data pad and began writing her first report to the collective. "Day 1, she typed. "Initial assessment, humans may be clinically insane. Further observation required, will update soon." She had a feeling her updates would be frequent and disturbing. 3 weeks passed on Earth and learned many things about humans. She learned that they consumed poison for pleasure. They called it alcohol and caffeine and spicy food. She learned that they kept predators in their homes and called them pets. She learned that they played games where they pretended to kill each other, and they watched sports where they actually hurt each other, and they thought all of this was normal. But nothing prepared her for the invitation. Captain called a meeting one morning. The entire unit gathered in a briefing room, including. She had grown somewhat comfortable with these humans over the past weeks. Lieutenant always made sure had food she could eat. Sergeant had taught her 3 human card games. Even the quiet soldiers whose names she struggled to remember would nod respectfully when they passed her in the hallways. "We have a training exercise scheduled for this weekend," Captain announced. "Standard jump training. The weather looks perfect and we need to keep our certification current." Noticed the soldiers around her sitting up. Some of them smiled. Private, a young woman with very short hair, actually pumped her fist in excitement. "Jump training?" asked quietly to who sat beside her. "Parachute training," he whispered back. "We jump from aircraft, like the skydiving you saw on the news, but military style." Felt her stomach drop. "You do this for training, this is required." "Required for our unit, yes. We're rapid response. Sometimes the only way to get somewhere fast is to drop in from above." Captain was still speaking. "The ambassador is welcome to join us as an observer. It would give her a better understanding of our capabilities." All eyes turned to. She wanted to say no. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to refuse. But she was here to observe humans, to understand them, to report back to the collective. How could she write an accurate report if she ran away from the very things that made humans what they were? "I will observe," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "From inside the aircraft, I will watch." Sergeant laughed his big laugh. "Smart choice, Ambassador. The view from inside is almost as good anyway." The day of the training arrived too quickly. Found herself inside a loud, shaking aircraft, surrounded by humans in strange equipment. They wore tight suits and helmets and had large packs on their backs. The parachutes. The only things that would stop them from dying when they threw themselves into the sky. The aircraft climbed higher and higher, watched the ground grow smaller through a tiny window. Mountains became wrinkles, rivers became threads, cities became gray smudges, and still they climbed. 20,000 feet, the pilot announced, approaching jump zone. 20,000 feet, did the conversion in her head, over 6,000 meters above the ground. The air outside would be thin and cold. A fall from this height would take minutes. Minutes of falling before the ground came up to meet you. The humans began checking each other's equipment. They moved with practiced ease, pulling straps and testing buckles. Private helped sergeant, who then helped lieutenant, who then helped captain, a chain of trust and verification. They were putting their lives in each other's hands. 2 minutes to jump, the pilot called. Move to sit beside. You okay, Ambassador? You look a little green. Well, greener than usual. I am processing the situation, said. You are about to fall from this aircraft. Jump, corrected. We jump. There's a difference. Falling is what happens when something goes wrong. Jumping is what we choose to do. The result is the same. Gravity pulls you down. Shook his head. No, Ambassador. The result is completely different. When you fall, you have no control. When you jump, you have all the control. You choose when to go. You choose how to move in the air. You choose when to open your parachute. The whole thing is about choice. A light turned green near the aircraft door. Had not even noticed the door opening. Cold wind screamed into the cabin. The humans stood up and moved into a line, ready to throw themselves into nothing. Green light, go, 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 someone shouted. And they went. One by one, the humans stepped to the edge of the door and leaped out. They did not hesitate. They did not pause to look down. They simply stepped forward and disappeared into the blue void. Watched Captain go, calm as if she was stepping off a curb. She watched Sergeant go, laughing as he fell. She watched Lieutenant go, silent and graceful. Private was the last in line. She turned back and gave a thumbs up, a human gesture of approval. Then she jumped, screaming with joy as the wind took her. Rushed to the window. Far below, she could see the humans falling. They looked like insects against the vast landscape. They moved their arms and legs, controlling their fall, coming together and then separating. They were dancing in the sky, playing in the space between life and death. Then one by one, colorful parachutes bloomed open. The falling stopped. The dying stopped. And the humans drifted down like seeds on the wind. The aircraft began to descend to meet them, sat back in her seat and tried to understand what she had just witnessed. 12 humans had thrown themselves from this aircraft. All 12 had survived, and all 12 had done it with smiles on their faces. When she met them on the ground, they were laughing and embracing. They talked over each other, sharing details of the jump, comparing views and sensations. Sergeant claimed he had done a flip. Private accused him of lying. Captain was already discussing the next training session. Lieutenant approached with concern in her eyes. Ambassador, are you all right? You look shaken. I am trying to understand, admitted. You just fell from the sky. You should be traumatized. You should need medical care, but you are happy. Smiled gently. It's hard to explain, Ambassador. When you're up there falling through the air, everything else disappears. All your worries, all your fears, all your problems. There's just you and the sky and the moment. It's the most alive I ever feel. But you could die. We could die crossing the street. We could die eating dinner. Life is full of ways to die, shrugged. At least this way we feel alive first. Looked at the humans around her. They were mortal creatures on a dangerous world, surrounded by a hostile universe, and they had found joy in falling from the sky. She took out her data pad and added to her report. Day 21. Observation. Humans do not fear death. They make deals with it. They play games with it. They use it to remind themselves they are alive. This is either profound wisdom or total madness. I still cannot tell which. The alarm woke from her sleep. Red lights flashed in her quarters. A voice repeated emergency words through the speaker system. She had been on Earth for 2 months now, long enough to recognize the tone of real crisis. She dressed quickly and ran to the command center. The room was full of activity. Soldiers moved with purpose, gathering equipment and checking weapons. Screens showed maps and numbers and images that could not immediately understand. Found her in the chaos. His usual smile was gone. His face was serious in a way she had never seen before. Ambassador, there's a situation. A raiding party has attacked a colonial outpost on VII. There are civilians there, your people. His blood went cold. There were pirates, raiders, killers. They attacked soft targets and took what they wanted. They left nothing but bodies behind. What is being done? She demanded. The collective's response fleet is 3 days away. They sent out a distress call, but they can't hold that long. Paused. Our rapid response team is the only force close enough to help. We're being deployed. How close? We can be there in 6 hours, but there's a problem. Led her to a screen showing the outpost from orbit. The landing zones are compromised. Have anti-aircraft positions covering every approach. Any ship that tries to land will be shot down. Studied the screen. The outpost was built into a valley, surrounded by mountains. They had taken the high ground. Their weapons could reach any ship trying to descend. Then how will you get your soldiers to the surface? She asked. Met her eyes. The same way we always do when everything else fails. We jump. Felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. You cannot mean. Orbital drop. We go high enough that their weapons can't track us and we fall. Heat-shielded pods for atmospheric entry, then parachutes for the final descent. It's dangerous, very dangerous, but it's the only way. You will die. Some of us might, probably not all of us. His voice was steady. Ambassador, there are 300 civilians in that outpost. 40 of them are children. They don't take prisoners. If we don't go, everyone dies. Watched the soldiers preparing. Captain was briefing her team with calm authority. Lieutenant was checking medical supplies. Sergeant was loading weapons and making jokes that nobody laughed at. Private was writing something on a small piece of paper and folding it carefully. They all knew they might not come back, and they were going anyway. I thought you jumped for fun, said quietly. For the thrill, for the adrenaline. Shook his head. That's how we learn, that's how we train. We jump from planes for fun so that when we need to jump for real, we're ready. All that practice, all those training exercises, they were for this moment. Captain approached them. Ambassador, you're welcome to observe from the command ship. You'll be able to monitor our progress through the communication system. If things go badly, she paused. If things go badly, you'll be able to report what happened to the collective. Why? Asked. Why risk your lives for my people? Are not your species. That outpost is not your world. You have no obligation to help. Considered the question. Ambassador, humans have a saying. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all beings are created equal. Those civilians down there, or human or anything else, they're people. They're scared and they're in danger and they need help. We can help, so we will. Had no response to this. In her experience, species help their own kind first and others second, if at all. The idea that humans would die for strangers seemed impossible. Yet here they were, preparing to do exactly that. The team boarded their transport ship, went with them, sitting in the command section where she could watch everything happen. The ship launched from Earth and entered hyperspace. 6 hours of waiting began. The soldiers spent the time differently. Some slept, taking rest while they could. Some checked and rechecked their equipment. Some talked quietly with each other, sharing memories and making promises. Private showed the paper she had been writing on. It was a letter to her mother. Just in case, said with a small smile, You should always say what needs to be said before you jump." When they arrived at VII, the situation was worse than expected. The had brought more ships. The outpost's defenses were failing. Through the communication system, could hear her own people crying for help. The transport climbed high above the planet, so high that the curve of the world was visible below, so high that the air was gone and space began. The soldiers entered their drop pods, tiny capsules built to survive the fire of atmospheric entry. Captain's voice came over the communication system. "All units, final check, sound off." One by one, the soldiers reported ready. 16 voices, 16 lives hanging in the balance. Ambassador said, "If we don't make it, tell your people what we tried to do. Tell them why we came." Founder voice, "I will, Captain, I promise." Drop in 30 seconds. Remember your training, trust your equipment, trust each other. We've done this 100 times before. Today is just one more jump. Watched the countdown on the screen. When it reached 0, 16 drop pods launched from the transport. 16 tiny objects falling toward a world on fire. 16 humans choosing to fall so that others might live. Gripped her seat and watched the pods become streaks of light against the atmosphere. Falling stars. That's what they looked like. Falling stars coming to save her people. She had never prayed before. Her species did not believe in gods. But in that moment, watching those humans fall, she found herself hopping desperately for their survival. "Please," she whispered to the universe, "please let them be as insane as they seem. Please let them survive this." The pods disappeared into the clouds below. The communication system filled with static, and was left to wait and watch and hope. The drop pods screamed through the atmosphere of VII. Inside each one, a human being rode through fire. The outer shells burned bright orange as friction with the air turned them into meteors. From the ground, anyone watching would have seen 16 streaks of flame cutting across the sky, falling stars with soldiers inside. Watched everything from the command ship. The screens showed heat signatures, trajectory calculations, and communication feeds. The pods were moving too fast to be tracked by conventional weapons. The anti-aircraft guns tried to lock on, but the targets were small and moving at impossible speeds. "Surface in 2 minutes," the ship's computer announced. "Pod separation in 90 seconds." Inside his pod felt the familiar pressure of rapid descent. His body was pushed against the restraints as the capsule shook and rattled. Warning lights flashed. Alarms beeped. Everything was loud and violent and hot. And somewhere deep inside him, beneath the fear and the adrenaline, there was a small voice saying, "This is what we trained for." The outer shell of the pod exploded away, was suddenly in free fall, surrounded by burning fragments and rushing air. The wind hit him like a wall. His body wanted to tumble, to spin out of control, but his training took over. Arms out, legs spread, stable position, control the fall. He could see the other soldiers around him, 16 dark shapes against the orange sky of VII. They were alive. They had survived the entry. Now came the hard part. "All units, check in." Captain's voice came through the helmet communication system. 15 voices responded. Everyone was still breathing. Everyone was still falling. Below them, the outpost grew larger. Could see it on the command ship screens. The buildings were damaged but standing. Smoke rose from several locations. Vehicles surrounded the main structure. The aliens had not breached the inner defenses yet, but it was only a matter of time. 15,000 meters, the computer announced. Parachute deployment in 30 seconds. Corporal's voice came over the communication system. She sounded excited, like she was enjoying this. "I can see the enemy positions. They have no idea we're coming." "Maintain radio silence after chutes deploy," ordered. "We hit the ground running. You take your team to the east entrance. You're with me on medical. Secure the civilians. Everyone else, weapons free on any you see." "Yes, Captain," 16 voices replied. The parachutes deployed, watched on the screen as 16 bright colors bloomed against the sky. The falling stars became drifting flowers. The soldiers slowed dramatically, swinging beneath their canopies as they guided themselves toward the outpost. They finally noticed them. Weapons fire streaked upward, but it was too late. The humans were already too low, already too close, already landing. Sergeant hit the ground first. He released his parachute and had his weapon up before the fabric touched the dirt. A soldier came around a corner and fired twice. The alien fell. More shots rang out as the other soldiers landed and engaged. The battle for the outpost had begun. Listened to the communication system with growing amazement. The humans moved like water. They flowed around obstacles, covered each other's movements, and spoke in short sentences that communicated entire strategies. Years of training had turned them into a single organism with 16 parts. East entrance clear, reported, moving inside. Contact at the south wall. 4 tangos down, another voice called. Medical team is in. We have wounded civilians, is treating them now. Reached the main shelter where the civilians had hidden. He kicked open the door and found 300 terrified faces staring at him. Families huddled together in the darkness. Children clung to their parents. Old ones prayed to gods had never heard of. I'm Lieutenant Park of Earth, he announced. We're here to help. Please stay calm and stay down. We'll have you out of here soon. A young child, no more than 5 years old, looked up at him with wide eyes. Did you come from the sky? Knelt down to her level. Yes, we did. We saw you needed help, so we fell from the stars to find you. That sounds scary. It was a little scary, but you know what? Being brave means doing scary things to help the people you care about. The battle outside continued. Private cleared a building by herself, moving room to room with deadly efficiency. Captain coordinated everything, her calm voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. Sergeant laughed as he fought, actually laughed like combat was just another training exercise. Lieutenant worked on the wounded without stopping. Her hands were covered in blood, both human but she never paused. One patient after another, one life after another. She had come down from the sky to heal, and that was exactly what she did. After 3 hours it was over. They were defeated. Some had fled. Most had not been given the chance. The outpost was secure. The civilians were safe. Once transport finally landed, she stepped onto the ground of VII and looked around with 4 amazed eyes. The humans were everywhere. Was distributing food to hungry civilians. Was still treating wounds. Was explaining to a group of children how parachutes worked, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. Captain approached with a tired smile. Ambassador, good to see you on solid ground. Captain, I watched everything. I saw you fall from space. I saw you fight. I saw you risk everything for strangers. Struggled to find the right words. Why? How? I still don't understand how you do these things. Looked around at her soldiers, at the civilians they had saved, at the alien sky above them. Ambassador, do you know what humans fear most? It's not death. It's not pain. It's the feeling of being helpless. The feeling of watching something bad happen and not being able to do anything about it. She turned back to, we jump from planes and fall from space because it makes us feel powerful. It makes us feel like we can do anything. And when people are in danger, when children are crying and families are breaking, we need to feel like we can do anything. Because that feeling is what lets us actually do something. Watch pick up a small child and carry her toward the medical station. The child was laughing, despite everything she had been through. You are remarkable creatures, said quietly. No, replied, we're just humans, this is what we do. 3 days later, the collective's response fleet arrived to find the outpost secure, the civilians safe, and 16 exhausted humans drinking coffee and playing cards. The collective officers had many questions, had many answers. But some things, she was beginning to understand, could not be explained with words. Some things had to be felt. Some things required falling from the sky to truly understand. 6 months had passed since the Battle of VII. Sat in her quarters on Earth, surrounded by data pads and notes and half-finished reports. Tomorrow she would leave this strange blue planet. Tomorrow she would return to the collective and present her findings. Tomorrow she would try to explain humans to a council of beings who had never met one. She had no idea how to begin. The door chimed, entered with 2 cups of something warm. He handed one to and sat down across from her. He looked different than he had 6 months ago. There were new lines around his eyes, new scars on his hands, but his smile was the same, that impossible, infectious human smile. "Last night on Earth," he said, "how are you feeling?" "Confused," admitted. "I came here to study your species. I thought I would watch, take notes, and leave with a clear understanding of what humans are. Instead, I am leaving with more questions than I arrived with." "That sounds about right. We confuse ourselves most of the time." Turned to her data pad. The final report sat there, incomplete. She had written dozens of drafts, but none of them felt true. How could she explain what she had seen? How could she describe the moment when 16 humans fell from space to save strangers? How could she capture the sound of sergeants' laughter in the middle of battle? "Can I ask you something?" said. "Anything, Ambassador." "When you jumped on VII, when you were falling through fire knowing you might die, what were you thinking?" Was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window at the night sky, where stars glittered like distant promises. "I was thinking about my grandmother," he said finally. "She raised me after my parents died. She used to tell me stories about heroes from Korean history, warriors who faced impossible odds, scholars who stood up against tyrants, ordinary people who did extraordinary things because someone had to." He paused. "When I was falling through that atmosphere, burning through the sky, I thought about her. I thought about all those stories. And I thought, this is my story now. This is the moment when I get to be the person in the story. Not because I'm special, but because I'm here and I can help, and that's enough." Felt something shift inside her, some piece of understanding falling into place. "You do not jump because you are not afraid," she said slowly. "You jump because you are afraid, but you go anyway." Nodded. "Fear is useful. It tells us what matters. If I wasn't afraid of heights, jumping wouldn't mean anything. The fear is what makes the choice valuable." That night after left, deleted her entire report and started over. She wrote through the darkness until the sun began to rise. When she was finished, she read her words back to herself with all 4 eyes. Final report on human species. Ambassador of the collective. I was sent to Earth to determine if humans were insane. After 6 months of observation, I have reached my conclusion. They are not insane. They are something far more interesting. Humans evolved on a world that wanted to kill them. Their planet has earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, predators, diseases, and extreme temperatures. By all logic, they should have gone extinct long ago. Instead, they thrived. They conquered every environment on their world and then reached beyond it to the stars. How did they survive? Not through strength. Other species are stronger, not through intelligence. Other species are smarter, not through technology. Other species have older civilizations and more advanced tools. Humans survived through will, through stubbornness, through an absolute refusal to accept that anything is impossible. They jump from planes because it teaches them that fear is not a wall. Fear is a door. You can stand in front of it forever, or you can push through and find out what is on the other side. They fall from space because it reminds them that gravity is not their master, that physics can be challenged, bargained with, overcome, that the universe's rules are not laws so much as suggestions. They do things that terrify the rest of the galaxy because they understand something we do not. Joy and fear are not opposites. They are partners. You cannot truly feel alive unless you have stared at death and smiled back. On VII, I watched humans risk their lives for strangers, not for glory or money or political gain, simply because people needed help and they were able to give it. This is not insanity. This is the form of sanity I have ever witnessed. My recommendation to the collective is simple. Make friends with the humans, trade with them, learn from them. But whatever you do, never become their enemy. Because a species that jumps from planes for fun, that falls from space for duty, that fights through fire for strangers, that species cannot be defeated. They will always find a way. They will always push through. They will always survive. And they will do it with a smile on their face. End of report. Saved the document and closed her data pad. Then she picked up her communication device and sent a message too. I have completed my report, but I have one request before I leave. His response came quickly. Name it, Ambassador. She took a deep breath, then another, then one more. I would like to try the skydiving, one time, with very many safety precautions. The response that came back made her smile despite herself. Really? That's amazing. I knew you would come around. I've already got an on board. We can go this afternoon. The weather is perfect. You're going to love it, I promise. It's going to change your life. Set down her device and looked out the window at Earth's blue sky. Somewhere up there, humans had learned to fly by falling. And today, for the first time in her very long life, was going to fall with them. She was terrified. She was going to do it anyway. Maybe that was the most human thing of all. 8 hours later, stood at the open door of an aircraft, 20,000 feet above the Earth, was strapped to her back, guiding her through her first tandem jump. The wind howled. The ground was impossibly far below. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to step back, to stay safe, to survive. Ready? Shouted in her ear. Looked down at the world below. She thought about the humans she had met, their laughter, their courage, their absolutely crazy determination to feel alive in every moment. Ready, she said. And then she jumped. The fall was everything they had promised and nothing she could have imagined. The wind was violent. The sensation was overwhelming. For 3 eternal seconds felt like she was dying. And then something shifted. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in control. She was falling through the sky of an alien world, surrounded by humans who had become her friends, and she was alive, more alive than she had ever been before. She laughed. The sound surprised her. It came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere she had never known existed. She spread her arms and felt the wind catch her, and suddenly she understood. This was why they did it. Not because they were crazy, not because they were reckless, but because this moment, this single perfect moment of falling through the air with nothing but trust and courage and friends, this moment was what it meant to be alive. The parachute opened, the falling stopped, and drifted down toward the ground with a new understanding in her heart. Humans were not insane. They were just better at living than anyone else in the galaxy. And now, in some small way, so was she.